So according to Tom Pelissero, during the draft, the Bengals actually were offered a second round pick and some change. So more than just a second round pick. So a second round pick, probably like a fourth and a fifth. And they did turn it down because they won a first round pick. And according to sources, they still won a first round pick for Trey. Which, again, at the time would have been interesting, given the fact of if we did have in this last draft another second plus maybe a fourth and a fifth, like, who would we have drafted? And, obviously they wouldn't have replaced Trey, but still it would have been interesting to kind of go through and think about that option. But, of course, they did turn it down because they wanted a first-round pick. Now, according to sources, they still want a first-round pick, right? They're not in a situation where they want to take less than a first-round pick. And a lot of teams, just like they were back in April, are saying that it's way too much. They're asking for way too much. They don't want to give up a first-round pick plus have to pay Trey all the money that Trey wants. So we're kind of in this standstill just like we were in April, just as we are right now. Now, obviously, if they were to somehow make that trade again now, let's say they did give up Trey for a second and a fourth and a fifth, then this would be really, really stupid. Because then you'd be talking about a situation where now, you're not helping yourself out this year, you're helping yourself out in the future, but you could have also did this back in April and really saved yourself a bunch of crap. But, again, there is no positive way this ends outside of Trey or signing Trey Hendrickson. That's the only way this ends positively. Trading him in any fashion, whether it is for a second, fourth, and a fifth, or just trading for anything, other than maybe trading him for Micah Parsons, that could also be a W, or humongous W it would be, or trading him for like Quentin Nelson and DeForest Buckner. But anything else, it's just not going to work. It's just not going to work. It's going to be a bust. And they could have got this done in April, and we'd be talking about having an extra couple players on the roster right now, and they'd be able to help us out. But instead, we're going to be talking about players maybe in the future that could help us out. But right now, not helping us out in the short term, which we're trying to win a Super Bowl this year and in the future, but we're also trying to win this year. So I'm going to have to cover half the screen for this. Let me go ahead and play this real fast. This audio. One sec.
Contract talks between Trey Hendrickson and the Bengals remain at an impasse, and Cincinnati is listening to trade offers for their four-time Pro Bowl defensive end. Now, I want to be clear. No trade is imminent. They're not going to give him away, but this is a rarity. The NFL's reigning sack leader is available for the right price. Right now, Hendrickson remains with the team. They got a game tonight in Washington. He is on that trip. The sides have been in agreement for several weeks on the big numbers, the years and the money in terms of a new contract extension. But the Bengals to this point have been unwilling to do what they did for Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, which is break their structure and give guarantees beyond the 2025 season. So what would it take to get a Trey Hendrickson trade done? Again, a player who wants a multi-year commitment. Well, back before the draft, the Bengals had an offer on the table that was a second-round pick and change. At that time, they weren't willing to engage with that. They wanted a first-rounder. My understanding is that the price has softened or at least changed a little bit. At this point, the Bengals would want a player, somebody who maybe could even replace some of the production they got from Trey Hendrickson, as well as a pick in the 2026 draft. Is someone willing to step up and meet that price? That remains to be seen. The Bengals don't do a whole lot of trades for Hendrickson one way or another. He expects to get paid. He has made clear that much publicly. And even though the Bengals don't do those future guarantees, it makes sense. He's 30 years old. He's also a player who has not missed a game, has 35 sacks over the past couple of seasons, showing no signs of slowing down. There is interest around the league in potentially Trey Hendrickson being on the move.
All right, so that's kind of interesting. So we want a pick and a player. So it's not just a player, which we already expected. We wanted a pick and a player just because that would make the most logical sense right now. You have to replace Trey in some capacity, especially given the fact that we spent this whole offseason, not trading away Trey. So at this point, you didn't get the draft value that you wanted, like be able to get a draft this year and get some players to replace him. So it makes sense that, they're going to want a player, but a player and a pick. Again, like I said, I've given my thoughts and opinions on who I would want to trade for if we traded him. Quentin Nelson would be one. Micah Parsons would be one. DeForest Buckner. Like, there's options out there that, I think we could definitely benefit from trading him in that capacity. But I just want to pay him. I just want to pay him, get this over with, and move on to the season and stop this back and forth crap. Again, it's kind of weird to think, like, if we did get a second, a fourth, and a fifth back in April when they offered, would we be able, like, what would we have, gotten from that? Again, I said it earlier, but I really start to think, like, obviously the Bengals have 4 scouts, right? Now we have more than 4, but we had 4 last year. Question is, like, what will we have gotten from that? Like, will we have been able to get capable starters? Well, obviously you're not going to replace Trey Hendrickson with a second-round pick or a fourth or fifth. But, again, like I said, we haven't had the best draft history in Bengals when it comes to our we haven't had the best drafting when it comes to our scouts. So, I don't know. Again, like I said, man, it's forever back and forth, and I'm so tired of it. I just want the season to be here, and I just want Trey to be signed. I just want this team to be, the best it can be, and I feel like every single time we want it, it always ends up with some crap happening. So, hopefully, this is step forward of they just sign him, and they realize that this is idiotic, but who knows.